Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2012 Hendrickson Institute Seminar from Free to Fee and Other Information Age Challenges. I am Jane Littlefield, a librarian here at St. Mary's University. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of St. Mary's University of Minnesota and the Hendrickson Institute for Ethical Leadership. First, a bit of housekeeping. Please turn these off, your cell phones, or put them on vibrate. That's all the housekeeping.
You too.
I myself set mine on silent. The Hendrickson Institute was established by the tremendous generosity of our benefactors, Bill and Jean Hendrickson. The Hendrickson Institute for Ethical Leadership is a product of the shared vision between St. Mary's University and the Hendricksons to awaken, nurture, and empower learners to ethical lives of service and leadership. Today's seminar is made possible by a generous donation by an anonymous benefactor. I would also like to acknowledge the Minnesota Trade Office, our partner in this seminar and other events throughout the year. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Mary Jo Stengel in the back, Tim Odegaard, and Rachel Limon, all from the Minnesota Trade Office. There is information about the Trade Office and St. Mary's University in your packets. Now it is my honor to introduce Dr. Richard Bohr. Richard is a researcher and educator on China and the East-West interaction, and I learned hilarious to talk to. He is currently a professor of history and chair of Asian Studies at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University. He was also the president and executive director of the nonprofit Midwest China Center, the Deputy Commissioner of Trade and Economic Development, and the Executive Director of the Minnesota Trade Office, and a Director of Padilla, Spear, Beardsley International, a firm specializing in global intercultural communications headquartered in Minneapolis. Most notably, Richard is currently an adjunct program professor here at St. Mary's University in our Masters of International Business program. Richard will introduce our panelists and moderate the discussion today. So without further ado, Dr. Richard Bohr.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for coming today to what promises to be a most interesting panel. I'm very delighted to be able to introduce the panelists, and as they're giving their presentations, please think of questions and issues which you would like to ask them, because you will have that opportunity. So without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce our first presenter today, Jim Magnuson, who is a librarian at the Hennepin County Library System, which he has done since the year 2007. Jim coordinates small business programming at the Central Library in Minneapolis, working with community partners, SCORE, Legal Corps, and the City of Minneapolis. He has worked in various capacities at the library since 1991, including the Inform fee-based research service. Jim holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Minnesota and a master's in library science from the University of North Texas. Thanks for being here, Jim.
Thank you, sir. And thank everyone for coming. And thank you all also to St. Mary's and the wonderful staff for this opportunity. So, what is credible information and how do we find it? One aspect of credible information is how current it is, how up to date. As an example, I recently helped a patent lawyer from a downtown law firm who came into the library looking for a certain medical device textbook from 1995. He was working on a big patent infringement case and needed a chapter on implantable devices for heart surgery. I said, 1995, are you sure you don't need something more current? And he says, look, our law firm subscribes to the best databases available, LexisNexis, Westlaw, Bloomberg. I can get all the current information I want, but what I need is this particular edition to show what the science was like back in the late 90s when the patent I'm researching was first filed. So I blew the dust off it, and off he went with 17-year-old information that fit his needs perfectly. Now, in the not-too-distant past, textbook writers, and database vendors like Dialogue and media giants like the New York Times held monopolies on the credible information market. They developed reputations for being objective, accurate, and timely in their coverage and charged big money for their services. But as we all know, the rise of free alternatives like Google and Wikipedia have cut deeply into that market. With new business models based on click-through advertising and crowdsourcing and social search. Now we find information at millions of hits per second. Or more commonly, information finds us through news feeds, trending topics, and social media updates. Now one can argue over how credible these free resources are, but the fact is people have grown more and more reluctant to pay anything for information when there is so much available for free. As the technology activist Stuart Brand said, information wants to be free because the cost of getting it out is decreasing all the time. So why would an organization consider paying for fee-based services? One reason is the vital need to save time, to cut through the chaos of the internet. A $300 market report on the video gaming industry might be worth every penny if it saves time by packaging exactly what you need to understand potential customers and competitors. Another reason for fee-based is the need to add depth to our coverage of a subject. Much of the best information is locked behind paywalls and subscription pricing. Stuart Brand also said information wants to be expensive because it's so valuable. An investment manager, for example, cannot rely on Yahoo Finance alone for their specialized needs. They may need to subscribe to Value Line, Morningstar, Dow Jones, etc. In this context, fee-based really means value added in the form of specialized content and expert analysis that converts raw data into the knowledge we need to make better decisions. Companies pay thousands of dollars a year for such resources. But what about nonprofits and small businesses who can't afford such expensive information? Well, that's exactly what leads people to the public library, where they find the best of both worlds, free access to high-quality resources, including free databases, free computer access, and consultations with community experts like SCORE and the volunteer lawyers of Legal Corps. As an example, back in 2007, a woman named V.C. Williams was doing research in a prison library with the dream of starting her own food company. Like a good marketer, she tested her recipes on her fellow inmates. Previously homeless and addicted to crack, it was her second time in prison. 2 years later, in 2009, she found her way to the Central Library and met with our patent librarian who helped her through the process of trademarking a company. Meanwhile, her brother Bryce made use of library computers and with staff help did market research, built a website, searched for vendors, and set up spreadsheets for inventory and budgeting. And soon after, they launched the Sister Chris Barbecue Sauce LLC, which is already hugely successful with product on the shelves of Lund's and Byerly's and negotiations to enter 17,000 stores across the country. I invite you to read her story in the Star Tribune article in your packet. This is a great example of finding just the right information at just the right price. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Jim. Now, think of questions that you want to raise with Jim, because after the panelists finish their formal presentations, we'll open the floor up to discussion. Now we want to hear from Amy Bisonette, who is a lawyer, a teacher, and a writer, which she has been doing since 1987. Through Little Buffalo Law and Consulting, she helps her clients understand legal and ethical questions, conduct customer service investigations and analysis, and to develop best practices for their businesses. Amy holds a JD degree from the University of Minnesota and has served as an adjunct faculty member right here at St. Mary's University, Inver Hills Community College, and the William Mitchell College of Law. Amy is also the author of Cyber Law, Maximizing Safety and Minimizing Risk in Classrooms. And Amy is going to address the issue of who owns information and how are intellectual property rights protected. Amy, thank you.
Thank you all for coming. That's not my slide. Hang on.
Sorry.
Am I going the wrong way?
No. There you go.
Aha, there I am. Good.
A couple extra ones.
All right, thank you for the introduction. And absolutely, one of the reasons that I was asked to join the panel today is because I do practice law in the area of intellectual property, specifically copyright, trademark, rights, licensing issues, all of these issues tied around this notion of who owns the information. So the information that might be available to you for a fee, might be made available to you by a grant of permission for a fee or not for a fee, or information that somebody else developed and is putting out there for all of us to use, maybe under a Creative Commons license. There are three main categories of intellectual property under the law. Obviously, copyright being the most common. If any of you have ever put pen to paper, or you play a musical instrument, or you dance a dance that you've choreographed yourself, then you have created a copyrighted work. And that work is, you're the author of it, and is protected by copyright from the very date that you put it into tangible expression, something that the rest of us can perceive. So copyright's most common. Most of us have created some copyrighted work. Trademark is different, and that was a great description that Jim provided with the woman who came to the library who had the barbecue sauces. She wanted to protect her brand by applying for a trademark. And once she has registered her trademark with the federal government, then she is the only one who gets to call her barbecue sauce by the name that she has created for her business. So trademark has more to do with branding and you as a consumer understanding who created this product. Many of us are attached to certain brands, and we look for that brand when we are in the supermarket or when we're buying apparel. And so it's that notion of knowing who is behind this product or service that we are obtaining. Patent is probably the one area of the law that it's more exclusive. It's probably something that most of us have very little or no experience with. It's sort of the domain of the lawyer who is coming to you for the biomedical text, or drug companies, or people who develop processes or products that are very novel and usually very commercially viable and rewarding for the companies that develop them. So a different way of protecting the intellectual property. Intellectual property is just property you create yourself. And ownership then is deemed to be, in the hands of whoever created that formula, sculpted that piece of sculpture, or choreographed that dance. We protect intellectual property rights in a number of ways. Obviously, we've already mentioned registering a copyright or a trademark with the government. And when you do that, you go through that act of registering your work with the government, then you obtain particular rights. Sometimes between businesses, you'll see businesses engaging in discussions about, I have this idea, you have the ability to make that thing happen. And so that business-to-business partnership will involve something we call a non-disclosure agreement, where the parties agree that they are going to discuss each other's secret intellectual property and not reveal those discussions to anyone outside of that partnership, but all with the end goal of perhaps having a collaborative or a cooperative relationship where they can both maximize the profits from that intellectual property. Licensing agreements. In my practice, I represent a lot of artists, authors, children's book illustrators, people, again, who create intellectual property but don't really market it on their own. Their big goal, of course, is to take their book to a publisher and have that publisher say, yes, we will publish this book, and we'll put the money into it, and we'll distribute it, and we'll market it. And so licensing agreements are important. The rights holder needs to give permission to someone else to exercise the rights that are associated with that intellectual property. Sometimes we see infringement occurring with some of the social media networks or other internet service providers, and so one other way of policing the use of your intellectual property is to file a complaint. And we all hear about these when something shows up on YouTube. Maybe someone has created a mashup or a remix tape of someone else's movie or music video. Then there are claims of infringement, and the owner of the intellectual property goes to YouTube and says, you need to pull that down because we did not give permission, we didn't license the use of that. And then, of course, there's litigation, going to court, and that, of course, will happen in instances where there's no better resolution. I think that part of our discussion today, though, is this one. The technology has really muddied the waters with regard to ownership of intellectual property. And if you have ever listened to Larry Lessig, who is a lawyer who does a lot of speaking in this area, and particularly on TED Talks. I don't know if any of you subscribe to TED Talks. But one of the things that Larry Lessig points out is that we have really evolved from the early 20th century when most of us were content users. We used the content that somebody else generated. We read newspapers or we listened to music that was produced by a certain record company. So we've moved from that instance of where we were all content users to, with the technology we have available now, many more of us are content generators. We're creators. And so the technology has kind of muddied the waters. We have laws that have not necessarily kept up with technology, and it can really skew this notion of ownership. So whether it's because we have more content available through the internet, whether we have a decreased ability to police others' use of our content because somebody in Argentina might be using something that I produced that I put on the internet. We have different kinds of rights sharing arrangements that have evolved because of technology, and we have so many more content creators. The rules of the game are really changing. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes, and in the meantime, somewhat confusing. So that's why I'm here.
Very good. Fantastic.
Thanks a lot, Amy. Our third speaker is Keith Elzia. After 26 years in the technology industry, working for giant corporations, including Microsoft and IBM, Keith founded ECS, Enterprise Content Solutions, a data-driven marketing solutions company. ECS provides end-to-end creative and marketing services, from complex campaigns to the management of day-to-day marketing tasks along the entire value chain. Prior to ECS, Keith was the Enterprise Market Development Executive at Microsoft headquarters. He focused on forging new business opportunities within existing global enterprises and then replicating these solutions throughout the specific industries worldwide. Keith began his career at IBM, spending 18 years holding a variety of positions in engineering, sales, marketing, and global media services. Today, we're relying on Keith for his expertise in discussing how companies use data to narrow the global audience of consumers down to their potential customers. Keith.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad I had to follow Amy instead of having her go behind me, because a lot of this information you're going to hear are probably going to be scrutinized in some sort of way legally. So I was like, Jade, that was a good move before me. I thought what we would do is spend just a little time sharing with you an example of how we're leveraging data. In spite of that technical background that I have, I hope that to make this a little bit more fun than just some of the boring discussions I normally have to have on data technology. And we're going to use one of the examples of the company that we're engaged in right now, T-Mobile, to share some insight with you about how we're using data. Now, I know there's a second paragraph on here that is a little scary, but what it suggests is that we've moved from assessing profiles about people and data to actually creating clone models. In this discussion we're going to have today quickly, clone model is not a sophisticated expression of advanced technologies about profiles. I really mean that we are writing sophisticated algorithms to create clones of people. More about that later. And so what we have put together, our company, is a infrastructure that's fairly significant. As you can see here, it has about 630 million records. As you know, there's only 320 million people in the United States, individuals. So therefore, the rest of those records are actually the last 2 years of transactional history about you. I know, it's kind of scary. And then we have this other infrastructure that consists of about 874 fields of information about each individual. A field of information would be like your first name, last name, city, state, etc. Some of the other information might be cultural background, language spoken in the home, some of the interests that you have, et cetera, et cetera. And the ultimate objective of this is to enable businesses to identify their best customers, and then after identifying those best customers, identify by writing clone models of who their best prospects are that match their best prospects, their best customers. So therefore, you first find out who your best customers are. You then have us, we write the clone modeling capability, and then we run that against those 630 million records and come back with the best people who match your best customers. In hopes of now being able to analyze this in a quantitative method. In this particular case, T-Mobile was trying to go after the multicultural market. We had only run the multicultural, I just happened to be multicultural, but I had only run one of these before. So what we looked at was the data that represented where the multicultural market was in our country in terms of where people live. So you see the darker colors would represent most of the multicultural market in residency. So if you were to think about what this looks like in 2008, you can see the country change. And yet, some of the stores, at JCPenney or Target or whatever, they didn't move. But look what happened around them. But if you look at the marketing material that they send out, it's still a reflection of, and so it's just the data representing this, right? It's kind of interesting. So we asked them, in this case T-Mobile, well, where do you fit in terms of how you market to people? Just pick the box. And all of you can pick the box of where Target is on here, since you all happen to know. Okay, so if anybody picked the boxes to the left, okay, that's exactly what the senior vice president said. And before the president of JCPenney, who used to be the chief marketing officer of Target, that's the box he picked 6 months ago too. So he says, well, we're in the mass marketing, mass communications, okay, but the only way to get to regional and localization or personal marketing is if you have the data to identify who Jane is, what her interest is, what her likes are, things that she's purchased, market to her in that sort of way, and be right 90% of the time. If you're right 50% of the time, then you fail in the trust category. So so here you just have a picture of California. You have this this particular company that happens to be Best Buy, who markets to that entire part of Southern California in a traditional way. This sort of suggests that if you had, we're just pretending right now. That way it won't hurt as much. We're just pretending that if you had this amount of data, that you actually had the individual characteristics of each person, okay, then you would be able to select which person on which block you wanted to market to directly and be right. So in the T-Mobile case, this is something that they wanted to do. Their average conversion rate, I'm giving you the answers to the test afterwards, is about 0.7%. That means that of all the marketing that they send out to acquire new customers, they convert 0.7% of the time. When we did our data analysis and integrated the data with the media, for every $1 million they gave us, they made $8 million. That would be a 250% conversion rate. Right? Get that? 0.7% up to 2.5%. That's 250% more than what they've ever done before, and you see the results. And so how we did this was by simply appending all the data characteristics about the prospects that they had, of the interest that they had, to the existing customers that they had. And then we created these mathematical clones, which you see on the right. So the mathematical clones look exactly like these real multicultural people, except they are not. That's just a mathematical representation of what they want to go after. Then we run that mathematical clone against the 650 million record database, and yep, you guessed it, it comes back with all the demographic and psychographic information, in this case to the tune of 1.8 million people that matched exactly. Therefore, the cost of them doing this goes down directly. We drive that file using the print capability that we have, and now each of the pieces come out directly to the interest of the customer, in this case in the multicultural segments, which incidentally is the most difficult market to in this country, because you got to get everything right. You got to get the ethnicity right, you got to get the culture right, you got to get the race right, you got to get the language right, and if you don't, okay, then they see you as being inauthentic. So I've already given you the answer to the test. This is pretty much what we ran, a really good success, and then we did video in the same way. And so I just wanted to share with you in 5 minutes, as fast as I've ever done this, in 5 minutes what several companies are embracing this technology to perform. We've introduced this to Michael Litton, the new CEO of Sony, Michael Francis, who you know is the new CEO of JCPenney, T-Mobile. Last week we were with the Vice President of Marketing at Radio Shack. And so you see a number of companies starting to embrace this technology because it helps identify the specific interests of their prospects, and it has a better results in terms of its conversion. So thank you.
Thanks, Keith. I'm sure all of you passed the test. And Keith, thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Finally today, everybody, we have Cody Hansen. Cody is web architect and UX analyst at the University of Minnesota Libraries. He is the author of Libraries and the Mobile Web, a 2011 ALA TechSource Library Technology Report. He speaks, writes, and teaches about mobile computing, web content management, and information discovery. Today, he is going to help us answer the question, how has the packaging and selling of information changed business models? Time permitting, he will also answer the question, how are organizations adapting to information as the product? And then finally, Cody, you're going to start the conversation about information use. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bohr. I'm going to do all of those things, I promise you. I'm not going to use slides. I'm going to keep my remarks fairly short, just because I'm, as hopefully my bio from Dr. Bohr conveyed, I am, my whole career and much of my hobbies revolve around how technology changes information creation and consumption. I find that the information that my colleagues up here have shared already to be fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to a conversation with them. But I wanted to begin just with an anecdote that dovetails actually very nicely with what Keith was saying. It's something that has been in my mind as I've been looking forward to this panel and thinking about new ways in which we as individuals and as organizations use information. And so this goes back actually about a year and 8 months or so when I found myself at my local Target store making an unusual purchase. It was that night, the only thing in my basket was 5 pregnancy tests. And my son will be a year old in May. And what I found fascinating about that visit to Target, the Target where I'd been going and doing grocery shopping, every week for months and months, was that when I made that transaction at the cash register, the little coupon printer spat out one coupon, and one coupon only, and it was for Minute Maid soda, which is something that I'd never bought before in my life. And typically, when you go and make your weekly grocery run to Target and you get the coupon that comes out there, it's often, at least in my experience, you buy one product and you get a coupon for a competitor's product in the same category. This was something totally out of the blue. And it fascinated me, and it stuck in my mind. And then, much more recently, you may have seen Target was in the local and the national media for the kind of analytics that they are doing to drive their coupon marketing. In particular, what they have been doing, according to these articles, I have no inside information about it, is that they have created a database. It sounds very much like Keith's, except it's an internal database that they keep of customers and their transactions. And millions and millions and millions of records that allow them to do very powerful modeling and predicting of customer behavior. And this is information that you don't need to be a member of Target's loyalty club for this information to be gathered. They're able to gather information in many different ways, none of which are really opt-in, and make very, very powerful marketing decisions. And that affects what spits out in the coupon printer at the register. It affects the coupons that come to your home. And they have been wildly successful in this effort. They've been able to, in essence, capture incredibly valuable information that is implicit in the day-to-day operation of their business. It's information that has been there all along, but only now do they have the tools to capture, correlate, and analyze all of that information in a way that they can make use of it for their business. It's been this untapped resource that they're now able to use for their marketing, and it's been very, very successful. So from the business perspective, this intelligence that they're able to leverage on their own customers gives them better ability to compete in the market, better ability to drive purchasing decisions. But I was thinking about this from the customer perspective too, thinking about me walking in and making a regular or a very odd purchase, and what kind of products are going to be recommended to me. And the net result of Target's gathering and leveraging of this information for their customers is that, for the most part, it's of a benefit to me. I get more relevant marketing information. I get better coupons. I get information that allows me to make better shopping decisions. However, there's a cost to that information use as well. What it amounts to is that any discount that Target is able to offer on those products is in effect being subsidized by the information that I'm giving up by being a regular customer. I'm subsidizing the cost of business because because of the information they're able to gather. For the most part, this system works very, very well. But if you've read the articles, the article in particular about Target, they focus on one situation where it backfired very horribly, and that's when a man went into his local Target store irate because Target began mailing his teenage daughter coupons for baby formula and diapers and things like that. And he wanted to know where Target got off marketing baby products to a teenage girl. And of course, he came back to the manager of his Target a couple weeks later to apologize because Target knew that his daughter was pregnant before he did. And so what this illustrates to me is that, Jim talked about information as a product and information as a service, and Amy talked about information as an asset. Keith talked about leveraging information for marketing, things like that. I think it's also very important as individuals and also in our organizations to understand information as a liability. Because for every piece of information that we gather about users and customers and things like that, that has the potential to come back and bite us. And it's not just a laptop getting stolen out of a car with customer information on it, but it has to do with the betrayal of trust when we overstep in our ability to predict using the information that we gather. So I thought that was a very interesting article and a very interesting illustration of what we're able to do with information these days. And so with that, I'd like to chat with my colleagues up here.
That's great.
Thank you so much. Okay, who would like to throw out the first question? Or you can make a statement. Yes, ma'am.
I've got one. I think this is all very interesting as I work in the library, and one of the things that we have talked about a little bit when we've met before are filter bubbles, and all of you mentioned that a little bit in what you were talking about. The filter bubble, for those of you that don't know, is you gather information, you do a search online, you buy something at Target, that information is being tracked about you, so sort of permanent, what could you say, I guess, a profile of you is built. And so you don't necessarily know that it's there, and when you go online to find information, when you go to a store to buy something, the purview that you have is a lot narrower, and you don't actually know it because this has been done invisibly to you. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are, and it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. I think it's both. I'm curious what your thoughts on this whole idea of filter bubbles and pushing information to people even before they seek it. What will that sort of do to our culture of creativity and innovation that we need to definitely nurture now that information is so easy to get? One of the things that I don't think you can gather by statistics is an innovative idea or something like that. So what does all of this filter bubble thing do to the creativity, the critical thinking that is so important to people?
Filter bubbles, please.
Well, I see it in searching Google at the library when I'm helping somebody at the desk or over the phone and they've got a topic or doing my own personal searching. I can see the ads that tend to crop up and they obviously target me. But as a so-called professional searcher, I mean, I'm against that. I don't want to be told, or led along by the nose, this is what you have to find, or this is how you want to search. So, we're always trying to educate people in their own searching, to make them more self-sufficient, to go into the advanced search functions where you're more likely to get specific keywords that might circumvent some of that personalization that's going on. I consider myself a black sheep. I guess that's a marketing term of somebody that, they can't quite fit into their little peg of personalization, and that's fine with me.
I think it's a case where it's really important that as information consumers, both individually and in organizations, as we're trying to find information that's relevant, that we be very, very aware of the business model of the information sources that we seek out. Because the kind of filter bubble that you describe, it only exists if the business model of the information provider doesn't align with your business model or your needs. By way of explanation, when the information provider has a vested interest in directing you one way or another, they obviously are less objective, less trustworthy than an information source that is interested in the sort of free, fair, open, flat provision of information. And so these are the hidden costs of the free services, right? I think it originated as a quote from a user on Metafilter, but it's become very, very common these days that, if you are not paying for it, you're not the customer, you're the product being sold. And when we are not paying for information service, then we may not be getting information service, we may be getting marketing. So I think it's important to be very savvy about the interests of the information sources that you interact with.
Okay. Yes, sir.
When is the information on me intellectual property and they are stealing it from me? When is the information on me intellectual property and when are they stealing it from me?
Amy.
Wow.
That's why I wanted to go after her. Exactly. Good little job.
I sense that you have a little bit of an issue with the information that's being gathered about us 24/7. I think that your pushback on that is something that many of us feel. And on the one hand, I can engage in a marketing survey, and if I know up front that that's what I'm doing, when AirTran says, hey, answer these questions and we'll give you a $5 drink coupon, I know what I'm doing, right? And I am giving that information up volitionally. It's harder when we're not always able to perceive, of course, when the information's being gathered. Now, the system that Keith in his business has developed for gathering information, that in itself is intellectual property, the method of gathering. Is it theft when information is taken from you? It depends. It depends on how that happens. We know that there certainly is online data theft. And the law would characterize that as such, as criminal activity. Someone takes your credit card number, they access your social security number, but this other sort of information gathering that occurs when we swipe a credit card or when we buy a product or when I participate in my online survey with a retailer or a service provider that I like, maybe knowing or not knowing that information will also be sold somewhere else. That's not, at least in the eyes of the law currently, a breach of privacy, a criminal act. Should there be more disclosure when that information is being gathered from you? I think many of us would argue that, yeah, we ought to at least be being told when our information is being gathered, sold, reported. Is it being reported on us individually or as part of a metric of all the people who have participated that day? So, Keith, this is your business, so what do you think?
I was hoping that she was just going to put a period, right? Then we go to Cody. Life is good.
I didn't know that's why they sat us together, though.
Well, you have, are you familiar with this concept called opt-in data? Where you have willingly given permission for your information to be opted in. And so a lot of data that we have is associated with that, but typically you think about opt-in data as an online experience. But for those of us who have been in data for many years, before there was opt-in for emails, there was traditional data file opt-in, which is what you saw me present. including the public record information. So I'm intimately familiar with the example that Jim mentioned about the Target thing, because I met with the executive responsible for the data analytics group. And one of the things that they were intrigued with is the fact that you do not have an absolute understanding of what the specific date of birth is of every child in the home. You do not. They have a date range. So the date range ends up actually acting against you because you're really not sure. But if you have the actual specific date information, okay, then you can do what we call suppression. And you saw me skip over that here, but if you look at this particular file here, you can see that, you see where it says total suppressed? Okay, so the gentleman sitting in front of you, okay, did the analysis of the information that that particular company thought was not appropriate, which would have been one of the points that Jim was making. And so what we did was we took every field of information that was not appropriate, and then he suppressed them, right? That does a couple things, right? It takes out a lot of the records out of the clone model, right? But it makes for a more appropriate targeted piece. And our goal there is to try to be as respectful as possible about the people that we're targeting, and only for those people who actually have an interest in what this particular company was selling. So therefore, it becomes a more complementary thing, you know. But right now, as Amy mentioned, there is no law against not having access to public information. In this particular case, they weren't the T-Mobile's customers, right? They were prospects. So what ended up happening is that they got a very satisfactory experience because only the people who had an interest in what they had to sell, those were the only people that were targeted. We suppressed everything else out. So I just wanted to give you my perspective. Obviously, I'm a pro data person. so I'm always trying to look for a way of making information simple, giving it to Jane only the stuff that she wants, that she says she wants, based on her behavior and her transactional experience. Right? Otherwise, she gets bombarded with all of those things. You've seen the JCPenney commercials of all of it coming out. It's a mockery of the point that I'm making, the opposite point.
Go ahead.
I think that there's another interesting point here, and that's that you're taking it beyond what Amy and Keith mentioned about opt-in types of information gathering. Information is, in my opinion, not just product, service, asset, liability, but increasingly it's currency, and by which I mean, sort of. Little did we know that here in 2012 we would all be such active participants in a barter economy, where we willingly, regularly, and hopefully mindfully trade information for service. This is what happens every time you use Google. This is what happens if you use Google's Gmail service. This is what happens if you use Facebook or Twitter. You are trading information that you input into that system for the service that you get back from that system. We put information into Facebook because it makes it easier for us to connect with friends, colleagues, classmates. But those very same data points that are so helpful for us in making those connections are incredibly valuable to Facebook in terms of the marketing that they're able to do, because then they're able to allow people to advertise to employees of St. Mary's University who are between the ages of 36 and 38 and all these things. They're able to target very closely. And so hopefully those are, as I said, they're conscious decisions that we make. They're not always, and you can see the outrage that arises every time that information is used in a way that's very visible to people. We like the service that we get. We're willing to part with the information, but we prefer that we don't see it being used, I think is the way that ultimately works. So it's obviously a challenge. Nobody reads end user license agreements. But we're all responsible for those decisions that we make with the information that we provide in exchange for services.
It seems like the big social networks like Facebook are constantly pushing the envelope, and from what I understand, they're going to be they're going to have a big IPO coming up in May, and so it sounds like, you know, that's pushing them even further. And one of the latest things that they've come up with is called sponsored stories. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but apparently it's a new way of, if a friend knows, I think they had somebody's baby pictures showed up, and somehow they were using friends' what they like to pitch products. So it was crossing certain lines for some people. And so, like Amy was saying, there are no laws necessarily against these things, but, you know, the court of public opinion might create backlash against them and, you know, create cracks in the great Facebook wall, so to speak. So,
Question, yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the information business model. I've read that about 80% of the news that exists in the world is gathered through newspapers, which we all know have been having a difficult time with their business model and how to pay for that reporting. In the last year, both the Star Tribune and the New York Times have implemented paywalls so that consumers need to pay for the articles that they want to read after a certain point or number per month. And I'm just wondering if you know how that's going, if we know if customers or consumers are willing to pay for the information that they want to consume, and I would argue need to.
Cody.
I would say this is a case of, and you know, like I said, the business model of the information provider. Newspapers are struggling in large part because they were never in the news business. They were in the classified advertising business. And the classified advertising business has been thoroughly disrupted. There's no business there anymore. And so the news was, you know, a clever ploy to get classifieds into your house. And so now they are faced with making a business out of news, which is an entirely different prospect. And they have been organizations that are not optimized for monetizing news. They're optimized, or were. I mean, I want to give them some credit. There's been a huge shift in that industry over the past 10 years or so. But it's a huge challenge. They're, you know, in essence, you know, lifting up the house and replacing the foundation to do this. And I don't know any information about how well those efforts are going, other than that, you know, you see the New York Times is sort of becoming more and more aggressive with the limits that they place on free content. There's been a lot of argument that by ever having offered that information for free online, they sort of blew up their own market, because now we all expect it for free in perpetuity. So it's a huge challenge. I don't know how that's going to work for those huge incumbents. I think that there are a lot of new upstarts that are finding ways to make news their business, or you know, online advertising their business, which it is in and of itself pretty different from classifieds and such. You know, we have a local example in MinPost that's, you know, sort of partly community funded, partly advertising funded. It continues to be a very interesting time for the news business, I think.
And I would add to that it isn't, of course, just the news business. I work a lot with what used to be the traditional publishing business. Authors sold their manuscripts and books were produced and we bought books. And the thing, of course, that has changed is that we no longer think about the newspaper. And as Cody indicated, they were supported by classified ads. And if you wanted to read one story, you didn't read one story, you bought the newspaper. So these tangible artifacts have been replaced with just digital files. And in the publishing world, of course, you've seen a tremendous shakeup because now we have ebooks. And everyone tried to say for years, oh, I like the feel of a book in my hand. These ebooks are never going to take off. Well, they certainly have taken off, even all the way down to the level of children's picture books, which in January of this year, sales as compared to a year earlier of children's picture books had increased 245% in ebook form. So you've got a traditional business model that just isn't working anymore. Do we need book agents anymore when everybody can self-publish online if they want to? Should the publishing houses that have been able to pretty much call their shots, are they able to do that anymore? You've got a young woman in Minnesota who made $1 million selling paranormal romances that she wrote herself and uploaded to Amazon. She didn't need a publishing house. Well, now she's got one, and boy, are they paying for her work. And I think that's cool. But so I think it's interesting because it's not unlike decades ago when Southwest Airlines kind of joined the traditional air carriers, but with an entirely different model, a very innovative model. And what I'm hoping is that some of this will provoke innovation, and that the newspapers will figure it out, and the publishing houses will figure it out, but it's certainly going to look different.
Yes, sir.
I think what I've learned here is actually, I think, pretty interesting, because what you're saying is there really isn't anything free on the internet. The internet's not free. I like it to be free, but what I'm paying for the free stuff on the internet by giving the internet information to myself, so the internet can try to sell me stuff. Which I actually, the alternative, because I like the free stuff on the internet, the quote's free, at least I don't have to use PayPal for it, which is a good thing. And actually, in some ways, maybe that's not such a bad deal, is the realization that I'm coming to, because they're not making me buy the stuff, they just want to advertise it to me. And I do like all of that information I can get that doesn't cost me anything on the internet, at least not in terms of out-of-pocket dollars. So I guess bring on the advertising, and if I don't like it, I'll go to another website. I guess I had a comment, not a question, but it'd be interesting.
Yeah, all right.
I kind of look at advertising on the internet like television. I mean, I think we've all gotten used to that so much. In some cases, it just kind of blows by you, and you go into the living room while the ads are on, or they've gotten more interesting. So sometimes they are worth watching. But like at the end of a basketball game, there's 15 commercials, and that's why TiVo was invented, and so that you could just cruise right through those. And I've learned to do that with the internet too. It's just like I don't even notice advertising, and I don't know what that means in terms of how they're marketing to me, but I just reap the benefits of the freedom and the freeness.
But that's unsustainable, right? I mean, if you like the information that you're getting for free and the marketing isn't, at least according to you, isn't working, that bodes ill for the sites that you like to go to for information, right? I mean, I think because that's their business model, and I think in this sort of follows on to your point, sir, in defense of Keith's clone army, we all buy stuff, right? And we, for the most part, we like buying at least some of it, and marketing and advertising when it's in the right place at the right time it's not noise, it's useful information, or it can be. I mean, manipulative, sure, underhand and sneaky maybe, but when it comes down to it, when you need to buy a new shirt and you get a an advertisement that informs you about a new style of shirt or sale on shirts at your favorite store or something like that, it can be genuinely useful. So it's a tough balance, I think, but it's important to be aware of those business models.
Yeah, I was trying to describe this for the U.S. Director of Marketing, who's spent a lot of money doing what you just talked about, as they have for decades. You know. And so I was trying to figure out how to describe this without getting too technical. And so what I did was I simply went to the whiteboard and I drew a circle. And in the circle, I put squares, diamonds, crosses, and zeros. And I said, that's all of us in the room. Then outside, I put the letter V for Verizon, A for AT&T, S for Sprint, and I put T. That would be you, sir. And I said, now, and I drew arrows to our bubble. And I said, all of us are looking at all of this information coming to us, right? And I, Keith Elsie, I'm supposed to self-select and say, hark now, you must be talking to me. I'm a zero. Okay, now let's pretend that that might not happen often. I'm not that smart. I got a better idea. How about we just clone all the zeros? He made a decision that day. You know, it's just an interesting way that I just want, besides all those companies I listed, the only device that the T-Mobile company doesn't have is the iPhone. So why are you marketing in the same way to all of us when a whole lot of us aren't interested, you know? And so it was just an interesting way, and I'll say another point about the point that you made. And I see the social media as a 21st century version of television. In other words, it's just a different network, okay? I don't think the advertiser who sold the enterprise a $1 million commercial for 60 seconds has any idea who Jane Littleton is on the end of the television network. He doesn't even know that. And I don't know he knows that on the end of a node of a social media network. Okay, and I try not to say that except to the chief marketing officer, because I'm not trying to get into the vice president of marketing space, but just trying to tell him the truth, you know. Fact of the matter is. And so when he says to me, well, I got 500,000 fans, I said, okay, great, tell me about them. And he can't.
Yeah.
So then we do. And so it's just an interesting perspective, you know. So I think that, I think they're going to practice exactly what they've done for the last 40 years, right? Only this time through social media. Just a perspective. She had a question in the pink scarf.
Did actually.
See there? I saw you.
That was a quick hand. You were.
Yeah.
I was interested that the title of the session is free to fee and not free versus fee. That implies a spectrum of business models. And I work for a nonprofit, work for the Minnesota Historical Society. And we're in the business of, creating that vetted, curated information that people trust.
Absolutely.
And we have products that are paid, and we have products that are free, and we need to decide how to create a business model that's integrated so that we're able to provide a spectrum that doesn't compete but is complementary. And I wonder if any of you have seen successful examples of a kind of integrated model, or have advice for organizations like ours that are trying to do both in the best way to serve as many audience groups as possible.
I'd be happy to chat with you afterwards. Well, here it's very simple. I mean, from my perspective, there are a lot of people who are willing to pay for what you have, especially in the high content, highly enriched area. Okay, and if you knew who they were and that they had the ability to pay, hint, hint. Okay, that would be your zeros, right? Then all you have to know is what are the interest categories. And we're just pretending, because I'm not suggesting for a moment that we have this sort of thing. We're just pretending, okay? But if there was that sort of thing, and you actually had the interest and the people by first and last name and their ability to pay for it, right? You just created a micro segment of the market.
So it's know your audience, know who wants what,
If
your
you-
audience better.
Then the rest of the group should be for free, for everyone, right?
That's an interesting approach to
Yeah.
tap those who have particular interests and have the ability to pay,
Absolutely.
and in essence, have them subsidize the other programs that then you
Absolutely.
provide to those of us with more general interests or leaner pocketbooks.
It's like, the way I described it, it's sort of like, I'm in the circle, it's 30 people, and I'm the one jumping up and down saying, over here, me. Well, I mean, we don't even have a relationship, and you're gonna connect with me. So if there's 5 of us that have that, right, then we're your target, right? And we'll pay for it because we have an interest. And to Cody's point, because I've already determined what my value is of that, so therefore and then what I do with that information is now I'm building my own little personal business model for the value that you gave me. You did all the research, right? You invested all the effort. You have the infrastructure for all that, right? I just want to
You own the intellectual
You own the
property.
intellectual property. Here's the check.
Thank you.
You got it.
Sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the other day I was trying to search some student information, because it was not given in it. The white pages and the yellow pages is no longer free on the internet. I can't find a phone number anymore. I used to be able to type in a person's name and get their phone number. Now, I type in the person's name, and for $6.85, I can get their phone number. So, I don't know, I mean, that's just, it went from, it was free, and now there's a fee.
Wow.
Yeah, so they moved in the other direction. We can argue whether the white pages and the yellow pages are even relevant anymore. And we were having a discussion along those lines the other day. We were talking about classmates.com, and I don't know if any of you have ever tried to tap into classmates.com, but they put a picture of somebody presumably of your age and maybe from your region and say, do you know this person? Would you like to connect with your classmates? Well, the interesting thing is classmates.com has been around much longer than Facebook, but it was a fee-based service. You could only get so far, and then you had to pay for that information. So you think now they're looking back and saying, wow, do you think they're kicking themselves? Because they've just been bypassed. Facebook ended up with a different model, supported by advertising, supported by some data collection mechanisms, but allowed you to find those people for free. And as you said, going to an IPO now and much more successful.
On the other hand, when it comes down to it, which of those business models do you as a consumer feel better about? Which relationship would you rather have? Would you rather have the I'm paying you $20 a year for your service, and so it's in your best interest to keep me happy business model, or the I'm using your service for free so that you can sell me out
Yeah.
business model?
And you need to know what kind of business model you're dealing with.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I increasingly find myself in a position where I seek out opportunities to pay for service that I desire, as opposed to doing it for free, because I want the service provider to care about my happiness, and not just about me as a set of data.
Yeah.
So.
I want to comment on that. I've been thinking about that for a while since Ken spoke about loving free stuff, and I love free stuff too, but I think eventually the information, we've swung all this way to like free, get everything. Now I think we're slowly coming back when people realize that information and having access to it and some of your privacy is worth a fee that you pay out of pocket. And I wonder what small businesses can do with that, or how they can figure out how to use that to show this. When you pay, you're getting value added somehow.
Like making sure everything is current.
Well,
as an
that or,
example.
I know Facebook was such a huge deal, and I'm a big internet nerd, so I look at different forums on the internet. And now a lot of people are saying, well, as soon as Facebook went from being for colleges to open to everybody, it became less cool immediately. So even just having the thought of exclusivity or something, I think adds value somehow. So I'm wondering, the perception of what you're getting free is great, but there is a point, I think, for each person and each product that you are willing to pay money. So maybe that's your next venture.
Yeah, see?
Figure out where is that tipping point and how
Let's get
can
her
we-
signed up.
Yeah.
Was that intellectual
I know.
property?
No,
ideas are not copyrightable.
No, but I wrote it down on my paper.
Very nice.
Sir, you get the last word.
How many of you are trying to avoid being found? Do you go to Google and turn off all the information gathering? Do you go to Facebook and turn off all the gathering? Do you use an internet provider that isn't Google, that isn't MS Microsoft? Do you use private? I have a private email server, and everything's on my computer. As far as Google is concerned, I don't exist. As far as Facebook is concerned, I don't exist. Are you of that ilk?
I'm definitely of that ilk. I'd love to not be found. I know England and Europe have even more stricter
Much more
ways
stringent,
of opting out or not opting in the first place, just because they have more issues with privacy than we do apparently, and, from their history. And so, yeah, if there's a way to not be found, that's great.
Jim is absolutely right, that the Europeans have an entirely different view on this, and they would not put up with what we tolerate with regard to privacy policies, or maybe you want to call them lack of privacy policies. From my perspective, from my business, it's social media and the internet's a wonderful thing. I access it, I know that I can be found on Google, but I want to be found in that regard. I will also tell you that I'm not on Facebook, my dog is. And it's because then I can be on Facebook and I can see the few people I love and photos of them, but I don't get any 5th grade classmates saying, "Hi, let's be friends."
That is against the terms of service, by the way.
I know, but they got to take it up with my dog. The worst thing it's contractual, you're right. But the worst thing Facebook could do is kick my dog off. So.
Keith, Cody, any last moment thoughts?
Oh, I was just going to say, I like Amy, I try to take sort of a pragmatic approach. I try to be very deliberate about the information that I'm willing to share and not. And so I do, I use some privacy extensions on my web browsers and things like that. I also use and enjoy many, quote unquote free services. But I also take steps to ensure, to the best of my ability, that when I am found, that it is the me that I want people to find that they find. That doesn't mean that there isn't a drummer in a heavy metal band with my exact same name, and if you do a Google image search, the first thing that you find isn't him flipping the bird to the camera. There's not much I can do about that. But I try to make sure that if you Google my name, I'm in the the first page of results, and it's the me that I want to present to the world, and I feel like it's a case where the best defense may be a good offense.
Keith,
No, I'm,
you're fine.
yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
You were lost and now you're found.
Exactly.
All right.
By the way, for what it's worth, I am not on all these, they don't track my data. But seriously, 3 words. Nick Rosie, spelled R-O-S-I-E, in Minneapolis. Nick Rosie, Minneapolis. You'll get 3 Google pages. I have used search engine optimization. I have used tags. I have deliberately created an image. So if you do Nick Rosie, R-O-S-I-E, in Minneapolis, you get 3 Google pages. I know what it is, and you can use it very powerfully.
Nice.
All right, we'll go right home and do that.
Very nice.
Actually, I just sold myself to you.
All right, please join me in extending a warm thanks.
Thank you.
And very quickly in closing, thank you very much for coming today. If you'd like to know more about how to access how information is changing, please join us at the event center down the road about 2 blocks for the Hendrickson Forum. Information about that is on the registration table, and tickets are available at the door. And most excitedly, there's apparently a trolley going back and forth between this building. Oh, Erica's nodding. She must have taken it.
No, but I'm excited about it.
Yes. Going down to the event center. So if nothing else, take the trolley. Anyway, thank you. This was excellent. I really enjoyed it. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a good afternoon.